Well, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are listening, tuning in on YouTube. This is another episode of Chairmen Boards. I'm flying solo today, and we're going to be talking about audio racks for building a quad Cortex controller into the things you need to figure out before you even start wiring, before you start implementing any cabling or any units. So let's dive in. I have a couple sites that I like to utilize for all of this kind of setup stuff that we're going to dive into right now. All right, guys, so starting off with any board build I do, I always lay out a unit, especially if I don't have the unit prior. This I do have the rack tray, and I have some cable and stuff ran. But even before that, if I have a cool new idea or I have a client that comes to me, the first thing I'm thinking about is if it's going to fit. So I use pedalplayground.com, which is really, really handy. I can go and I can actually search Quad Cortex. It's a free site, pulls it up. It's as close to accurate as I've probably have found any site, which is really, really handy. They also allow this pedalboard and pedal option, so you can actually type in certain dimensions, because not every single pedal is going to be listed on here. So this makes it just much easier. And then from there, what we can do is we already know that this rack tray, that the internal depth of it all is going to be, it's like 19 by 14.5, this one. So obviously we have some space on the side. It's actually gonna be a little bit shorter. It's gonna be 19 wide total, but it's 18. But we know we have all this space with the lid and everything, and we have a crux. We're basically just gonna go start adding in things like I would set it up if this is all pre. So the way you see it on the rack right now is what this concept would be like, which is really cool. So I can see, okay, yeah, I have all this space. I could move this over. I could add, I could add a utility box. There's plenty of, boxes out there. You could add, some kind of a MIDI box. You could add some kind of, a clock. You could literally scoot this over and put the chalks, if you had like a DC7, you could put something like that there. If you really wanted, you could have a buffer, whatever you wanted. You had room on the side, which is really cool. But this is only going to be a quad Cortex, so I'm just going to put that there. And the cool thing with the rack and everything is that the tray, I actually flip it over and I recess it in. If you're watching, you can see I have a tray that has space underneath that I was able to flip around and actually utilize and recess this in to give me a little bit more clearance inside the rack. That's where this comes in handy. It's because then for this kind of setup, what you're doing is you're just basically, foolproofing it, so when you pull stuff out, nothing moves. I use 3M dual lock. I use the highest grade dual lock that I could get, so it doesn't move. People always say, oh, that's not coming up. Yeah, well, you don't want your over basically $1,700 investment to fall off, especially in travel. So this is my first step, is I always go to pedalplayground.com. You want to put in all your pedals. I have plenty of saved profiles, because you can actually come up here, top right corner, and you can save a file, you can load a file, so you can have a bunch of different options, different setups, different layouts and stuff that you could save, and you don't have to always keep redoing it, or you can just open up a bunch of pages. So what I will do is I will actually, now that I know that I have the layout that I want, what I want it to look like, what I will do is I'll have a secondary tab open. It's called Draw.io. So that's really cool. It's app.diagrams.net/pound. It's a Draw.io website. It's completely free. But what I will do is I will actually import an image in here. All right, so we want to thank the Guitar Sanctuary as our first sponsor, because they make this podcast possible. Guitar Sanctuary is located in McKinney, Texas. I had the pleasure of working with them for over 5-6 years, and they truly have top-notch stuff, from guitars to acoustics, electrics, bass, ukuleles, starter baby Taylor guitars. They have actually in-store lessons. If you're looking to learn and you are local, you can actually get lessons. They don't do any drums or anything like that, but they do vocal and keys, and obviously bass and guitar and everything. Check them out, guitarsanctuary.com. They have a wide variety of amps, pedals, stuff that we talk about on the podcast, switching systems. They have stock instrument cables, mic cables. You don't want to miss out. shoot them a text, give them a call, whatever you want to do, or visit them online at guitarsanctuary.com. And I'll be able to just post it in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically take a picture of this. I'm going to open this up here. I'm just going to drag it in. Should just let me drag it in. There we go. Actual size. So the cool thing about this site, and I would probably end up cropping it a little bit, but for this instance, I'm not going to do that right now. So from here, the cool thing about this is that it allows you to, let's say, turn on the dark setting. I'm going to take a picture of it so it doesn't actually have any black trim in it. It just has the board, which is, it'll make more sense when building it. It just looks cleaner as well. So I'm going to save it to my desktop, drag it in, actual size. So now it looks like it's just a board. So the cool thing about Draw.io is it allows you to actually figure out what you're going to be doing for size and everything, or for like cable runs. So like obviously we have some channels and stuff here. So like me, I can go over and I can actually do an arrow. I can change the color of the arrow. I'm going to make it a super bright color so we can see it. I can change the size of the arrow. So we're going to make it a little bit larger. So, and we know that in this setup that the input is going to be, is going to be a little bit different. And as you can see, I can actually move this around, which is really handy. So I can pull this around here, set it right there. I can bring up the size. This is what comes in really handy, is that you can actually see where everything's going. So you can have a start and finish point. So here, I'm just going to basically map out where I think I want like all my channels to go. And the cool thing about this site too is it allows helps with doing some angles. If you're doing, if you're trying to do some channel stuff, it allows you to have really nice straight channels so you can see it, especially like diagrams. So as you can tell, that's not very straight. If you're listening in on this one, what we're doing is we are running some arrows, and we're actually in copy and paste, and we're going to do two we're setting up the input routing. So what we're going to be doing is we're just basically just doing some lines on the Draw.io website with the diagram from Pedal Playground, and this is going to allow me to take that same diagram and correlate it over to this setup that we're going to build in front of us. So my easiest, way of this is just copy and pasting a bunch of times, because, it's the exact size that I want. A couple things might change. Like I'm going to end up changing the color for this one, just like little stuff like that. But this at least keeps the same, the same arrow color size. Like this will be red. It will change a little bit when I start having to do some other directions like this. What I'll do is move the output over. And if you're listening and this sounds really confusing, I'm trying my best to explain what you should be doing from a listener standpoint. But you're basically wanting to map out everything that you're doing for this setup. It looks a little crazy right now. But you actually want to map out everything that you're going to do for this setup so that when you get to the point of building, it's not confusing. It's because you start getting into, when you start building, we all kind of do it. We all get really excited and we want to, we want to get the rig done. We want to be able to play it, but sometimes stuff gets overlooked. So like on this, what this comes in handy is you can actually these are really close, so I'm going to spread them out. And the reason is on the website, and Draw.io isn't sponsoring this or anything. This is just the site I like to use. But what you can do with this free site is you can actually spread all these out. So I'm really spread them out so you can see. And then I'm going to change the color of another one, like this red one. I'm going to make it like a green or something so we can see it. It looks dark, but you can actually take these boxes, so like this rectangular box, and you can actually drag it. You can change the size of it. You can do whatever you want. But what I do is I will put it on a line. And when you double click, you can say, FX RTN for return. I'll put that in caps so we can see it better. And you could increase the size if you wanted, whatever you want to do to see it. But this allows, and you can copy and paste multiple times, whatever you want to do. So like I will stagger them so we can see them. But what you're doing is you're just allowing for yourself to actually have kind of a game plan. So like this is going to be FX send. You're going to have input 2, input 1. All right, next is going to be the guys over at Neural DSP. They have the Quad Cortex, which we are talking about today. They have the Nano Cortex, and they have their plugins. The cool thing about their plugins is that you can actually take what they have now, some of them, and you can load them onto the Quad Cortex, so you don't have to skip a beat when you're tracking in the studio to live performance. User code Chairmen for 30% off. As we like to say, that's 70% away from free. So go check them out at neuraldsp.com. Use the discount code. Let them know that the Chairman sent you when you use that code. So that's where some of your routing comes in. That just makes everything easier. We're also going to utilize the 1/4 inch outputs, because when you start getting into all this type of cabling and stuff, it can get really confusing because you're like, oh, what is what? And that's where this overhead, like these labels that we've created, will come in handy. As you'll see, I did it on this one setup where I actually didn't label any of the connections, and the client wanted to swap something out, but he needed to do it really quick, so he didn't know which were which. So that's where that comes in handy. I'm gonna make these orange. Is you have it labeled on the connector, you see what it needs to do, and it just makes it a lot easier. So shrink this guy down a little. So we can shrink this down, zoom in a little bit, get a little bit closer. But this just allows you to, like I said, make it a lot cleaner. All right. So from here, we're going to add another box. But obviously the labeling is not correct. So this is going to be output, output 1/4. And copy that. I'm going to paste that in here. So output 1/4, output 1/4. And then obviously all of this will be bundled going out the same conduit. I do the same process for XLR. But I'm just going to point it down so it doesn't get really confusing, because it can get confusing pretty fast on what is what. We don't want that. So what we're doing from here is now that we've created these channels, and I'll keep all these orange because they are our outputs, but I will move the label down here, and I'm going to make this sometimes the site will do that. We'll actually like kind of link them together, but we're going to change this to say output XLR. So output XLR. Copy and paste this. Same text. We're basically just kind of doing some grunt work when it comes to it. So now we have this all set. I'm not going to worry about the power right this second, but having a diagram like this, we could even change, we could change these to a different color so that you can do whatever you want. And I'll change these to purple so you can see. They look black, but they're purple. But this allows you to see, okay, I'm going to have input, out, 2 inputs, an FX send and return, 1/4 inch output, XLR output. You can do another one. You could do, like I would do a jotted line. So like if I do a jotted line, so that has like, or the dashes in the line, so it's a little more prominent. I know that, that's going to be MIDI related. Typically I'll do MIDI I would do a different color sometimes, But I also can do it with the line, which you can easily tell. You can tell that there's a difference. You obviously can see that that's not a solid line. So from here, now I have a MIDI. I know these are all the connections that I'm going to have to make when I am doing the setup. You can even copy and paste this onto this MIDI one. Cool thing too is when you start going larger than the box they give you, it actually opens up more page, which is really cool. So it expands the page. So you never have to like resize or do anything. Power we're not going to worry about. We're only doing MIDI in. We're not doing expression or anything because we would do that over MIDI. So from here, what you can do, and this is what I do, is I actually will just screenshot this like that. I may drag it over here or keep it up or whatever I decide to do. Like minimize that. I'm going to keep that up. So then this is what I'm going to be utilizing. This is this setup right here. So then I know when I go to the board side of it, we know where our inputs are, where our outputs are. So I'm going to remove the keyboard. All right, our next sponsor is going to be the guys over at BTPA, or known as Besttronics. Simply the best, as I always say. Brad and the crew over there put out top-notch gear that they can sell to you, they can integrate into your rig. They do a ton of quad Cortex redundant systems for a lot of touring musicians. So depending on your needs, what you're needing, you reach out to them. Brad will hit you up at btpa.com. Use their code DACHAIRS, DACHAIRS, for 10% off anything that you need online, from audio cabling to connectors to DC 2.1 millimeter connectors. Any of that you need, looms, check them out, btpa.com. We'll flip the tray around. I use this like little conduit jack. It just helps because it's recessed. I can run everything through here really well and it will lock it down. Depending on where you want your tray, your rack tray to actually be, will really determine how much cable. This is on the top, but it has to go down to a bottom channel worth of ML10 switching stuff. So I did like 4 feet of cable. Going back to the label side of it, another thing you want to do, like we talked about, is the labeling processes of the whole unit, is that you can see that everything is labeled, and I even went ahead and labeled everything on every single connector. I didn't do MIDI because MIDI's pretty standard. We got headphone out. That's one thing that would be a dotted line, would be headphone out. We got input right, input left. This will be a stereo unit. It can be used as, 2 inputs if you wanted. For this setup, we are using the unit as a stereo with an FX return and stuff. So what I can do is I can find the inputs. So I can easily sort through everything, find what I need, and I can easily go and I can click them in. From there, take some zip ties, and you just kind of start, you can assemble. I pre-wire one side, pre-label at one side, and then I leave the other side bolt cut with gaff, or not gaff tape, more just painter's tape with what the connection is, so that I have a better idea of where I'm going. I'm going to take a first zip tie. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to run the first inputs, and I'm going to tie them down. We're going to get them taut. If we have to clip it up, we have to clip it up, but I don't like stuff just being all loose. I'll even run a couple. Like what I'll do is, like for this is a return cable. We're going to go into return 1. Now we need to find the send 1 cable, which, if I'm not mistaken, it is going to be this guy. So we're going to run all of our send and return cables. There's a few of these that you can kind of do all together at the same time. So like we can do these 1/4" outs all together without having to, do more zip ties and stuff prior. So we got 3 and 4. So we got 3, and we got 4, which is underneath, and we have headphone. All right, so we have all this bunch of cables tied down. So what we'll do is I will go ahead and I'll actually zip tie some of this down, just so we can keep it nice and clean. With running cables, I always talk about you have to kind of look at what is like where everything is going. So like I know these left and right inputs, like anything that's left and right input that a little bit longer, the cable's gonna go on the bottom. Because we have this output 4 on the bottom, I'm gonna run it with the bottom set of cables. The reason is this is it sounds really crazy, but it creates a channel like this. So you can actually go and you can channel 3 on top, 3 on the bottom, really nice, just like that. And then you don't have, you don't have a funky bunch of cables. Let's just be completely honest. That's what it ends up being like. If I didn't have 2 inputs, you could do 3 on the top and bottom. You could just think about it as you're running cables into the grooves, which, is really handy. So from here, I did miss the zip tie right there all the way. So it's not even. So sometimes you have to cut. You have a little bit of waste sometimes. We want to make sure it goes all the way through the anchor. These are zip tie, 8-inch zip ties are thin. I don't like the really thick zip ties. I just don't like how they look. They're just not as flexible either. And I use the 1-inch and the 3/4-inch adhesive anchors from creationmusiccompany.com. What I'll also do is I will run a headphone cable with the XLR cable. So I'm going to remove the headphone for now. I'm going to run this first channel of cabling. All right, so our final sponsor is actually for all you Canadians out there watching and listening online. It's going to be GB Music and Sound. If you go use the affiliate code below, that will support the channel. Also tell GB that, the chairman sent you, and why not have the best of both worlds? Support us, support another business, buy some new gear today. Then from there, and get all this locked in, move a couple things around to make it fit. Why you want to lock the first channel down is because you want it to be done and you can kind of check it off your list. So like what I would do, like when I'm doing a build, I have a PDF form for my clients. So I will actually go through and I will check off as I'm building what I've done. So then I'm not second guessing or thinking about, oh shoot, did I run MIDI? Did I run this? Did I run that? You could also print off the piece of paper if you really wanted to, and then you could, cross it off or mark it off with a Sharpie or something. I did that for a long time because I would physically print off a piece of paper, but I do not print anymore. So we're gonna get all this nice and tight. Get it right, get it tight. Takes a couple niggles. All right, so we got that first bunch done. Some people leave them. I'm just gonna go ahead and cut these right now. I do not want that in the way. It would be really, really frustrating. All right. So from there, we know that the headphone cable's next. We know by looking at it, output 1, this is labeled output 1, output 2, left and right. So we can run to here. It might get a little tight, so what I'll end up doing is running the zip ties prior. So I don't run when they're this close, like when the anchors are this close to each other. Hold up so you can see it. So like when the anchors are this close to each other, I don't run them the same direction. The reason is that the ball, like the head of the zip tie, will push into this channel and it'll make it really wavy. Unless your thing is going for like an ocean feel, think I don't think you want to do that. So I'm gonna run a couple of these zip ties. I got 4 of them to do, and then we'll leave the last channel for MIDI. That's the cool thing with racks too, is it'll just really allows you to have a little extra space, especially when it's a single unit, so you don't have to feel like you have to bunch everything up. Now I'm gonna run my next XLR. I'm gonna link all of my zip ties together. All right, I'm gonna get these first 2 zip ties This will lock in our first couple channels. A little bit of slack on the XLR. It's fine if there's a little bit of slack, obviously, so it's easier to get out. Gonna add the last XLR. This one's actually gonna go on top of the channel because we're running 3 cables. So you can do 2 on bottom, 1 on top. The top one can go out in the groove. It just allows, like I said, it's a lot cleaner look. You could put them all side by side, but then you have this like split off for each time, so then it looks wobbly. There's a method to my madness, I guess you could say. This is just how I do it. And then I will leave a little slack. Because you want to be able to pull out the connector if something is wrong or something. You don't want it to be completely like super tight. Like this right here. These are all, they have plenty of slack. These, you could easily pop it out, repair the end, pop it back in. But in this rack, you really shouldn't have to repair any ends. That's one of the fun things with racks. All these connectors also have black heat shrink on it for string and leaf, so nothing is going to move. It's crimped down inside, but then I put the heat shrink on there. I have a link for printable heat shrink on my social media page, which really comes in handy. For this setup, I didn't do it. All black connectors, because we have a black unit, so it's a blackout style rack. So I run all the MIDI in. You could do MIDI out if you wanted. This isn't doing MIDI out, it's just receiving MIDI from a RGM GT22. So then from here, run the last couple cables to make sure everything is locked down, just as so. And then there you go. You have a pre-wired rack on one side. Bring it up nice and close. It's all pre-wired. Got all the channels. Everything is labeled. Up there. You see it. I do the labels on the opposite side facing. Don't really need them on facing the other way. As well as we'll have power going for the crux, which will go through, but the underneath, it will actually go through the back side of the panel. Straight in. We'll keep it separated. So yeah, there we go. There is our rack tray. All right, guys, so that is it. That is how you go from basically A to Z on building a rack tray, all the ins and outs that you need to know, the things you should be thinking about while building to allow your process to just be a lot smoother. There's like the little stuff of just like connectors, the placement of the cables, the run of the cabling, all that can be simply avoided just by having some of these basic steps, like using pedalplayground.com, like using this Draw.io site that we've talked about today. It's just using these kind of things, these tools, to make your setup easier and also help envision what it's going to look like. So if you like the podcast, please subscribe below, give us a like, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We would love to hear from you. Give us, how many stars you feel like we are given. I think 5 is the highest. We'd love to hear some input. If you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below or send any of the chairmen a message. We do have our new YouTube channel, obviously you are watching it on, but we also have a Facebook page called Chairmen of the Boards Podcast that you can go join. No questions needed. Join, post your gear, ask questions. Hey, I have this noisy power supply. We can help you out. Other people in the community can help you out. And like our Instagram page, Chairmen of the Boards Podcast, we're also posting and doing live content there throughout the week. And sometimes we'll do some live chat opportunities. Thanks for watching. Have a great one, guys.